Like it does all the time, the ESPN basketball recruiting rankings set social media on fire last week when they dropped. We wanted to give it a couple days to marinate before we brought in ESPN National Recruiting Director Paul Biancardi. Paul, my man, what's going on?
Jason, this is going to be fun. It always is with you and me.
Always is. Always is. I got to ask you, man, because, we done gave it a couple days. I did that on purpose, and you know that. How are the inbox text messages? Are they popping? Paul, talk to me. What's going on?
Well, they pop that day.
Okay.
They pop late into the evening, then early in the morning, and then it dies down.
Okay.
But it's not too bad.
Okay.
It's not what you would think
Yeah.
it once was, maybe 5-8 years ago. It's more civil now.
Yeah, I get it. I completely get it. I always talk about this. Me and you've had this conversation before. Sheer numbers. I mean, we got 185 spots, right, in the three classes. I mean, just talk about how mind-boggling it is to even get on the rankings as a high school basketball player.
Well, it's really hard. If I throw some numbers out to you and the audience, I think you'll understand. First of all, only 1% of the senior class plays Division I basketball. Yeah. And that's roughly about 800, 900 kids. It was 1,000 at one time, but because of the portal, it's down between 800 and 900. Right. There's close to 500,000 kids, Jason, that play high school basketball. That's mind-boggling. So to rank 185 kids between three classes, now, of course, there's so many kids that you're never going to look at. You know where to go to look at players, right? You and I know the events, the camps. We know the people in the business, so we know where to go. And my background helps me from the coaching side know where to go, who to talk to, and what I'm looking at. But it is mind-boggling. And we also rank, Jason, guys by position. So we'll do 50 by position in the senior class. So that bumps it up to 250 in the senior class.
Wow. Insane. Obviously, you touched on this a second ago, but 20 plus years in the college coaching ranks at, you even won Coach of the Year at Wright State. Just talk about, I think a lot of people ask this question, and I think this will help clear things up for people. What's the formula you guys use? Obviously I worked at ESPN, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it makes for a fun question. What's the formula you guys use to come up with ranking the prospects?
Well, there's a criteria, and you said formula, criteria, almost one and the same. Kind of big picture, breaking it down, track performances.
Right.
Impactful, influential, dominating performances. Mm-hmm. When a kid plays well to that level, you track it. Right. When you see what somebody can do to help winning, you track it. And then under that performance category, I mean, there's so many different categories. You can break it down into, athleticism. How did they impact the game with their athleticism, with their basketball IQ, with their scoring, with their shooting, with their non-scoring play? I love this category. Passing, breaking pressure, handling the ball, rebounding, defense. So there's a whole host of categories under performances, but that's the number one thing we have to look at. You have to influence somehow the game, impact winning, and did you stand out? Were you a dominating presence during the game? Yeah. And then the second thing is production.
Right.
What's your productivity level, man? What do you bring to the game all the time? What can I count on you to do each and every game? 10, 5, and 3? And then, of course, productivity level and performance, they tie into competition.
Yeah.
It's important that you're productive, and it's important that you influence the game, but eventually you got to play against, the big boys.
Yeah.
And then there's potential. What's your potential in the college game?
Right.
And then projection, NBA draft projection, first round, second round.
Yeah.
That's it. That's where we stop it, because I'm not sure if there's anybody, even the NBA guys, that can tell you who's going to be a great or a good NBA player. But there's plenty of information out there to figure out where a guy can be drafted. So you take those 4 Ps, I like to call them, and they factor into the criteria that makes up the rankings. It's not a high school ranking board, right? It's not just, hey, you're the best high school player in the country, period. And it's not a draft board. It's everything I just mentioned.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, obviously a guy who checked off all of the boxes was AJ DeBonsa, who is your number 1 player in the 2025 class. I know that's hard. Been there, right? So I know Cam Boozer was pushing him. I know Darren Peterson was pushing him. How tough was that to just, to give him the number one spot? Because he's got guys on his heels for sure.
Yeah, tougher this time around.
Yeah, I bet.
Much tougher. I mean, AJ is everything that you and I know, and for the audience, he's on target to be the number one pick in the 2026 draft. He dominates games now in several of those categories I mentioned.
Yeah.
I love his basketball IQ. He can beat you with his body, his mind, and his skill. And he's highly productive with enormous upside in the game. And he's a competitor. Something I didn't mention a second ago, where another category was traits. I look at your coachability. I look at your competitiveness. I look at your body language. I look at everything. I go under the surface. So for him, I mean, he is the best in so many different categories.
No doubt.
But Cam Boozer,
Tough.
man, I didn't see a kid win as much as he did all summer long. And Darren Peterson is just an absolute stud as a guard. Some people say he's a shooting guard. I think he's a shooting guard by nature, but he plays a little bit of point. He's a downhill attacking guard. He scores and defends. Same thing with Boozer. Boozer impacts the game in so many different categories, and he defends as well. And then there's AJ. So it's 1, 2, and 3, but it was really, really close this time.
Yeah. I guess that, last year, if you didn't pick Cooper Flagg at number one, you were just trying to be different for different sake. So, I mean, that was pretty clear cut. But this year, like you said, there's competition. Do you think that makes it more fun for the players too?
I think so. I don't think it's great when it's a runaway race. Like,
right.
For example, like this guy's not going to move off the number one spot no matter what anybody else does. I think when you have multiple guys in position to challenge for that number one spot, for me, it's very exciting.
Right. Absolutely. Let's talk about some fringe 5-star guys, guys that, right on the cusp, but, you look at them and you're like, hey, they got some real potential that, they're in position to, with all the things that you talked about, the criteria, they could maybe potentially grab that coveted 5th star. Talk about some of those guys.
Yeah, and that's a precious 5th star because
yes, it is.
You don't give that out easily.
Yes.
And for 5 stars, that means that you can be a centerpiece of a college program. You have great performances, dominating performances right now, impactful performances. You make a difference in winning. 5-star is very, high end, of course. And then there's the low end of the 5-star and then the high end of the 5-star, which AJ DeMonts is the high end of the 5-star. Yeah. But for a couple of guys that are close on the cusp, I look at Bryson Tiller, who was a 5-star. He had to bump down a little bit because guys moved up. And Bryson didn't play a lot this summer. He was injured. And you don't hold injuries, but if you don't play, it's hard to evaluate and grade you when other guys are playing. He's right on that cusp, and I have a strong feeling he'll be back into that 5-star status.
Okay.
And a guy you know very well, I think you were just down at Montverde Academy.
Oh, yeah.
Is Hudson Greer.
Oh, yeah. Bad man. Yeah.
I've watched him since he was a sophomore. He gets like an A++ when it comes to the productivity level. And he's going to have a chance to have strong performances and impact winning at Montverde. I like his upside. He's right on that cusp of that 5-star status.
Yeah, hard worker, very productive. I love Greer.
Yeah,
for sure. A guy I really loved this summer was Matt Abel, who eventually committed to Miami on the Adidas 3 SSB. He tore that up. Talk about something. He's up to number 56, I think, in the rankings. Big jump up for him, and well deserved. Talk about some guys who have kind of made those big jumps, and maybe even some sleepers in the ranking.
Yeah. Let me tell about Abel for a second, because I saw him about 2 years ago at the Hoop Exchange in Florida, run by Scott Golden. Great event. And his dad actually played for us at Boston College, if you can believe it.
Okay.
Yeah, Doug Abel, undersized, tough post player. So when I saw Matt, I was like, Matt is a good prospect. He was a Division I prospect when I saw him at the time. But his growth, especially in the last 6 months on the Adidas circuit, has been unbelievable. His shooting percentages, over 40% from three. He's got great size. And he jumped into the rankings, and I was very comfortable to put him in the mid-50s. And we talked about all those numbers before, 500,000 kids playing high school ball. 1% goes D1. And now he jumped into the rankings, but he earned it. And his recruiting has really reflected that. Nate Ament was a riser.
Yeah.
If you go from 8 to 5, you crack the top 5, there's not a lot of space there.
That's right.
So Nate gets big props for cracking that top five.
Yeah, he's tough.
And guy for me who's a sleeper, I'm going to go with Xavier Stanton, the big fella out west. He's pushing 7 feet, man, and he can run, which I look for right away with bigs. Can they run? Can they catch? Can they rebound?
Yeah.
And he does all three really well, and he's a shot blocker. And you talk about his traits, extremely coachable, right? Great body language, becoming more competitive,
Right.
very dedicated to the game. And when you're pushing 7 feet, now he's still on the back end of the 100, which, by the way, is still very special and very elite.
No doubt.
But he has a chance to move into the top 50. I really like everything about him.
Indeed. Now we got about 2 months before the season starts. Thank goodness. I can't wait. I'm loving football, but basketball is, this, right?
That's your game, man. Hoops are your game.
So, what do you say to the guys that are like, man, what do I have to do to move up? What do I have to do to get in that coveted 160 and 25? What would you say they need to do? And you touched on this earlier, but kind of bring them back, circle it back around for me. Talk to them.
Well, the first thing I would say to every athlete, whether you're trying to make these rankings or just try to be the best player on your high school team, is don't play the comparison game. Because it's one game you can never win. You're going to be better than somebody else, and somebody else is going to be better than you. So put all the time into what you do. Be happy for other people, right? Respect your peers, but don't play the comparison game because you're wasting time with your own development. If you really want to be the best, then you can't focus on trying to prove yourself. The focus has to be on improving yourself. And that's how you become the best version of yourself. I understand a lot of people get caught up with, numbers next to their name. It doesn't determine success, but it does mean something. For the people that say, well, the rankings don't mean anything, well, they do. They mean those players are really good right now. Those players are thought of as some of the best in the country, and they have a very bright future. But there's also guys right behind them that have that same type of quality to their game.
Yeah, well said. Well said. ESPN recruiting rankings are live once again. Paul Biancardi, thanks for joining us today.
All right, Jason, let's do it again on the next ranking update in December.
Done deal. We're going to do it. Absolutely. Thanks again, Paul.